every problem has a solution, although the outcome may not be what was initially expected. Hoffmann. Alice, it does not promise that life will always be easy, nor does it lull us to sleep with perfect fairy tale endings. A dead end is often not as terrifying as the way we look at it. There are times when the mind panics so much that it turns a closed door into a final full stop, when in reality, life is simply forcing us to find another way. People often suffer because they are too attached to their initial expectations. They want to succeed exactly how they imagined, to be loved by the exact person they expected, and want everything to play out according to the script in their head. And when reality goes off course, they think life has betrayed them. But sometimes, today's disappointment is the very thing that saves us from an unsuitable future. There are departing trains that make us cry, only for us to realize years later that we avoided a disastrous journey. Faced with a problem, the brain often reacts as if standing before an abyss. It magnifies fear, imagines a series of worst-case scenarios, and makes us believe everything is over. Like someone lost in the fog, they assume the world is only gray because they cannot see past a few meters. But fog does not last forever. Only when they calm down do they realize that every problem has a solution. It is just that sometimes the solution is not what we expected. Life does not always fix things by returning what was lost completely intact. Some relationships cannot be saved, yet they teach us how to love more maturely. Some failures shatter old dreams, but simultaneously open up a more suitable path. A tree with branches broken by a storm cannot return to how it was, but it can grow new, stronger branches. The same goes for us. Healing is not always about returning to our old self, but sometimes learning to become a stronger version. The most important thing when facing difficulties is not to panic in search of a perfect answer, but to stay clear-headed enough not to give up before the solution appears. Because often, life does not take everything away. It is just forcing you to let go of an old path, to see another door that you never noticed before. Do not despair when things do not go as planned. Not every ending is beautiful in the way we imagined, but many painful endings silently guide us to a better life. Learn to accept that the best solution is not always what we want most, but rather what helps us keep living, keep moving forward, and become stronger after everything. Failure is not bitter unless you accept it. Joe Clark. Failure is merely an event, but it is how we interpret it that turns it into an abyss or a launch pad. Some see failure as a death sentence for their lives, while others view it as a valuable lesson for growth. People often fear failure because they confuse failing once with being a failure. Stumbling just once, they immediately let negative thoughts flood their minds like water breaking a dam. They begin to doubt their abilities, self-deprecate, and quietly surrender before life actually defeats them. The most bitter thing is not the bad outcome, but that they turned their backs on hope. Failure is like fire. It can consume the weak, but it can also forge a stronger person. An iron bar must go through the harshest heat to become a sword. So must we. The most resilient people are often not those who have never fallen, but those who have been shattered many times, yet still have the courage to put themselves back together and keep walking. They understand that wounds are not a sign of weakness, but proof that they fought. Pain is often shorter than the obsession with it. A failure may only last a few days, but constantly living in regret, self-blame, and helplessness can imprison someone for years. Like someone falling off a bike, the wounds will heal, but if they are too afraid to ever ride again, that fear is what ruins their life. Life never promised that every effort would be rewarded immediately. Some doors only open after hundreds of knocks. Some dreams must go through countless nights of despair before seeing the light. But what is precious about us is not how many times we win, but that after each failure, we still keep faith in ourselves. A single missed shot does not make you useless. Getting lost once does not mean you will wander forever. What truly makes failure bitter is when you sit down among the ashes and decide that you will never stand up again. But if there is still will in your heart, then every failure is just a rough patch on the journey of growth. And sometimes, the most painful falls teach us how to walk most firmly afterward. You may find your worst enemy or your best friend in yourself. English proverb. Some people step out into the world with a very calm smile, yet inside them, a war never ends. They doubt themselves, lower their own value, and lock themselves in the cage of fear and old memories. And then, without any external enemy, those negative thoughts silently destroy them piece by piece. People often think life is painful because of betrayal, circumstances, or others not understanding them. But sometimes, the deepest wound comes from one's own hand. That is when we constantly tell ourselves, I'm not good enough, I will fail, or I don't deserve to be loved. Those words are unspoken, but they echo in the mind like dripping water, slowly wearing away a stone. A person who lives too long in self-criticism will gradually become a prisoner of their own soul. Yet inside that very person, the strongest friend also exists. It is the part that knows how to stand up after days of despair, wipe away tears, and keep walking. It is the gentle voice reminding us that failure is not the end, and that any wound will heal if we learn to love ourselves. When people begin to treat themselves with understanding instead of hatred, they are like a dry land, watered by the first rain of the season. From the place once full of thorns, seeds of hope begin to grow. The human mind is both heaven and hell. A single positive thought can save a life, while a prolonged negative thought is enough to drown an entire future. Therefore, the most important thing is not how many people are against you out there, but what exists inside you. If your heart is filled only with resentment, you will view life through the eyes of darkness. But if there is faith and self-compassion in your heart, you will see light even in stormy days. The strongest person is not one who has never fallen, but one who knows how to turn themselves from an enemy into an ally. When you learn to listen to your heart, forgive your shortcomings, and be patient with your journey of growth, you will realize that the person who saves you from the abyss has never been anyone else but the one living inside you. It is not enough to aim, you must hit. Italian proverb. Many people live their whole lives with beautiful goals, yet ultimately remain in the exact same place. Because between wanting and achieving, there always exists an invisible distance, the distance of discipline, of the ability to endure loneliness, and of the failures that no one sees. People often like the feeling of dreaming big. They write plans, talk about the future, and imagine the day they succeed. But the mind sometimes likes to deceive itself with the illusion of preparation. It makes us feel as though simply thinking about victory is the same as getting closer to it. Like an archer standing for a long time aiming at the target, perfecting every angle, but lacking the courage to release the bowstring. In the end, the arrow never leaves the hand, while time quietly slips away. In life, some people fail not because they lack talent, but because they are forever stuck in a state of getting ready. They fear missing the target, fear being ridiculed, and fear the feeling of not being good enough. And then that fear turns them into bystanders in their own lives, like spectators, watching others live for them. The saddest thing is not failing, but never having dared to try your best. Hitting the target requires not only seeing the destination clearly, but also a spirit steady enough not to let the hand shake under pressure. Life does not reward those who only say someday. It only opens doors for those who dare to act, dare to make mistakes, and dare to learn from a missed shot to adjust the next one. A good marksman is not someone who has never missed, but someone who understands that each deviation is data to get closer to the bullseye. We often judge ourselves by our intentions, but the world judges us by our results. You may carry thousands of wonderful plans in your heart, but if you do not turn them into concrete actions, they are just like seeds remaining in your pocket forever with potential, but never becoming a tree. The important thing is not how beautifully you aim, but whether you are persistent enough to practice until the arrow actually pierces the center of the target. Do not just look at the target with longing eyes. Draw the bowstring of your will. Accept the possibility of hurt from failure, and boldly shoot, because sometimes the moment that changes your life is not about how big you dream, but whether you dare to act precisely at the decisive moment. Nobody ever plans to be poor, fat, lazy, or stupid. Those things happen when you don't have a plan. Larry Winget. Life rarely collapses because of a single major wrong decision. Most people slide into failure due to aimless days of drifting. No one wakes up one morning and decides, "Today, I will ruin my life." But they quietly do so through small habits neglected day by day. People often underestimate the power of procrastination. A single lazy day seems harmless. Spending money recklessly once doesn't seem worth worrying about. Skipping an evening of study to indulge in short-lived pleasures does not produce immediate consequences. But life operates like water dripping on stone, not loud, not dramatic, just silently eroding the future bit by bit. And then one day, people look back at themselves in astonishment and ask, when did everything start going wrong? It is terrifying how decline often comes so quietly. Gaining weight does not happen from just one meal. An empty bank account does not happen from just one shopping trip. A mind becoming depleted is not because of a single day of stopping learning. Everything is the result of hundreds of small, uncontrolled choices. Like an abandoned garden, if you do not actively plant flowers, weeds will grow on their own. Life is the same. If you do not design it with discipline and clear goals, chaos will automatically occupy the space. People prefer immediate comfort over long-term rewards. The brain always wants to choose the easy way. Sleeping a bit more, eating a bit more, postponing for another day, and without a strong enough plan to guide us, we are easily swept away like a rudderless boat in a whirlpool of fleeting emotions. The most dangerous thing is not a major failure, but living a life in decline unconsciously, while still thinking things haven't gotten that serious yet. Simply by consciously building a plan, people begin to regain control of their lives. A plan does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be clear enough to let you know what you must do today, instead of letting the days pass in vain. Successful people are not necessarily more talented than everyone else, but are usually those who know how to create a structure for their lives, knowing when to learn, when to rest, when to strive, and when to stop. Life is like a plot of land. If you do not actively sow seeds for the future, time will automatically sow stagnation, and then one day, you will have to live in the forest created by your own lack of planning. Therefore, learn to live with direction not to become a perfect machine, but so that each passing day silently brings you closer to the best version of yourself. It's hard to make the right choice if you're afraid of making the wrong one. Roy T. Bennett. It is the fear of taking responsibility for one's own life, because each choice is like a door. Stepping into one place means giving up countless other paths. And what makes people hesitate is not necessarily that they do not know what they want, but that they fear regret if that decision leads to suffering. People often want absolute certainty before taking action. We want to know for sure that we will succeed before starting. Want to know for sure that the other person won't hurt us before loving, and want to know for sure that the path ahead is correct before walking. But life has never operated that way. It is like walking through fog. You can only see a few steps ahead, and for the rest, you must trust and move forward. If we keep standing still, waiting for everything to be certain, we will remain stuck where we are forever. The fear of making the wrong choice often makes people lock themselves in procrastination. They overthink, analyze every possibility, and imagine hundreds of failure scenarios. And then, instead of making a decision, they let time decide for them. Ironically, many think not choosing is safer, but in reality, that is also a choice. The choice to lose opportunities, like someone standing at a crossroads for too long for fear of taking the wrong turn until night falls and they go nowhere. People suffer not only because of wrong decisions, but also because of the pressure to be perfect. They forget that growth is essentially a process of trial and error. No one is born with the ability to see through the future, to know what is best for them. There are paths we only realize are unsuitable after walking them. But that very experience shapes our maturity. A child learns to walk by falling hundreds of times, not by standing still to avoid pain. The right choice is not always the choice that makes you most comfortable. Sometimes it is terrifying, full of uncertainty, even causing you to lose sleep for many nights. But if a decision helps you get closer to the person you want to become, then despite the difficulty, it is worth it. Confidence does not come from never having chosen wrongly, but from knowing that, whatever the outcome, you are strong enough to face and learn from it. Life does not require us to be perfect in every decision. It only asks you to be brave enough to live truthfully with your choices, because sometimes the deepest regret is not taking the wrong path, but never having dared to take a step. And strangely, many choices that seemed like mistakes are the very things that lead us to the most mature version of ourselves. Do not let the fear of making mistakes turn you into a bystander in your own life. Accept that every decision carries risks, but growth only appears when we dare to step forward without knowing for sure what lies ahead. Because in the end, the strong person is not the one who always chooses correctly, but the one with enough resilience to turn even wrong choices into lessons that help them live more deeply. Live, learn, and pass it on. H. Jackson Brown Jr. Many people live a long time, but have not truly lived. Many people learn a lot, but change nothing in their souls. And there are those who carry a wealth of experience to the end of their lives without ever leaving any light for others. Living is not simply existing day by day. A tree also exists. A machine also operates. But humans are different because we have emotions, memories, wounds, and aspirations. Truly living is when we dare to feel life with all our sincerity, knowing pain and loss, knowing the flutter of love, knowing how to stand up after failure. There are young people whose souls are already old because they live like shadows, repeating each day. Conversely, there are those who go through countless storms, yet their eyes are still full of life because they do not let life turn their hearts to cold stone. But living alone is not enough. Without learning, we easily become prisoners of our own old thoughts. Life is always changing, and the most dangerous thing is not a lack of knowledge, but thinking we already know enough. A body of water standing still for a long time will become murky. The human mind is the same. Learning is not just reading books or accumulating information, but also learning to understand ourselves, understand others, and understand why we once suffered and why we need to grow. Sometimes, the greatest lesson is not found in school, but in the failures that force us to look back at ourselves. After all, what makes a human life meaningful is passing it on. No one can take everything with them when they leave this world. Money will change hands, fame will fade, but what we give away, a word of encouragement, a lesson, a kindness, an inspiration, can live on for a very long time in the lives of others. Humans are like candles. A candle loses nothing of its light by lighting another candle. On the contrary, the room becomes less dark. We often yearn to be remembered, but true immortality lies not in names carved in stone, but in the traces we leave in the hearts of others. A teacher can live forever in the memories of their students. A father can continue to exist through the way his child treats life. A word said at the right time is sometimes enough to change the destiny of a despairing person. Live, learn, and pass it on is like 3 breaths of a meaningful life. Live to experience, learn to grow, and pass it on so that our existence does not pass in vain. Because ultimately, our greatest value lies not in how much we have kept for ourselves, but in how much light we leave behind after passing through this life. The more you can keep your ego in check, instead of letting it run wild, the more successful you will be in all areas of life. Roy T. Bennett. The fastest destroyer of a person is sometimes not poverty, failure, or circumstances, but the uncontrolled ego living within them. It is like a fire kept in the right place. It warms and motivates, but left to burn unchecked, it can incinerate the entire future. The human ego is very subtle. It does not always appear in the form of obvious arrogance. Sometimes it hides behind the feeling of I am always right, the need to win every argument, or irritation when receiving feedback. It makes people prefer defending their self-image over facing the truth. And that is exactly what keeps many stuck within their own limits. Because when the ego is too big, people no longer learn. They only seek to prove. There are very talented people who cannot go far because they view advice as an insult. They are like a glass so full that no new water can be poured in. The more insecure someone is inside, the more they try to build a strong exterior to hide their fragility. Much anger does not actually stem from strength, but from the fear of being hurt. A person who cannot master their ego often reacts to life like a storm, loud, violent, but ultimately leaving only devastation behind. Conversely, truly mature people are often very calm, not because they are weak, but because they understand that not every battle is worth fighting. They do not need to win every argument to feel valued. They know how to listen, admit mistakes, and bow their heads to learn even from those with less experience. That is not inferiority, but the strength of a solid inner self. The more a person controls themselves, the more true power they have. One who controls their anger will preserve relationships. One who controls their complacency will continue to grow. One who controls their greed and impulsiveness will make wiser decisions. Sustainable success rarely belongs to those who only chase fleeting emotions. The ego is like a wild horse. If untamed, it will drag us toward the abyss of pride and loneliness. But if steered well, it becomes a source of strength, helping us move forward with confidence and resilience. The most dangerous thing is not having an ego, but letting it control your entire life. The strongest person is not the one who makes others bow down, but the one who can remain calm when their self-esteem is touched. And sometimes, the greatest turning point of a life is not about how much better you are, but the moment you learn to set your ego down to become a better version of yourself. To express yourself creatively, you do not need structure. You need an empty mind. Unique ideas are rarely born from a mind filled with noise, pressure, and the fear of being wrong. A glass that is already full cannot hold new water. When packed tight with prejudice, anxiety, and calculation, creativity gradually suffocates like a flame lacking oxygen. Modern humans live in a constant flow of information. They wake up with phones, sleep with unfinished thoughts, and their minds are always stretched tight between work, expectations, and the fear of being left behind. In that state, the mind is like a cluttered room, so messy that light cannot get in. And the sad thing is that many try to force themselves to be more creative by piling on more knowledge, more pressure, and more urgency, when what they truly need is space for the soul to breathe. An empty mind does not mean a blank or ignorant one. It is a state where we temporarily let go of the noise within us. It is when we stop trying to control every thought and stop forcing ourselves to create something grand. Just as a lake only reflects the sky when the water is calm, the human mind only sees profound ideas when it is no longer stirred by too much chaos. Many of history's great ideas did not appear when people were most stressed, but rather came during very ordinary moments, while walking, sitting in silence, watching the rain fall, or quietly sipping a cup of coffee. Because creativity is not always an act of production. Sometimes it is the result of listening. Artists, writers, and people with inner depth understand that inspiration is like a wild bird. The harder you try to catch it, the further it flies. But when the mind is quiet enough, it will seek you out and land. They feel they must always be busy, always thinking, always doing something to prove they are moving forward. But that very fear of silence makes them lose the ability to connect with their inner world. A forest that grows too thick leaves no room for light to pass through. A mind that is too full also leaves no space for new ideas to sprout. Interestingly, true creativity often stems from a state of freedom, not force. When people are no longer too afraid of making mistakes, no longer obsessed with being perfect, they begin to think differently, feel differently, and look at life with more open eyes. That is why children are often more creative than adults, because they have not been locked too deeply in the boxes of logic and prejudice. Sometimes, what you need is not to try harder, but to let go of more. Less noise, less pressure, fewer thoughts crowding your head. Give your mind quiet spaces, just as the sky needs open space for clouds to drift by, because in that silence, the most beautiful ideas often quietly emerge. And sometimes, our most creative moments are not when we try to create something, but when we are peaceful enough to listen to what wants to be born within us. Right now, we are creating our own future. Robert Ghost Wolf. The most terrifying thing is that many only realize they have created an unwanted life when it is too late to turn back. People often view the future as something very far away. They think that later they will change, strive, and live better. But the psychology of procrastination makes them live as if today does not matter. They forget that the future is not created by grand promises, but by things repeated every day. A person does not become healthy just by intending to, in their mind, but through the meals they choose and the workouts they do not skip. A relationship does not endure because of a few beautiful words of love, but because of how people treat each other in the most ordinary moments. The present is like an invisible workshop. Each negative thought you nurture is silently creating a future version full of weariness. Every time you delay what needs to be done, you are sending that debt to your tomorrow self. Conversely, each small act of discipline, each effort made when no one is watching, is like laying individual bricks for a sturdier life. An interesting aspect of human psychology is that we often overestimate big changes in the short term, but underestimate the power of small changes over the long term. A seed does not become a giant tree overnight. It grows quietly underground for a long time before anyone sees the first green shoot. Human life is the same. Success, maturity, or collapse are all results of things accumulated over time. There are those who spend their youth blaming fate, without realizing that today's habits are silently writing tomorrow's tragedy. But there are also those who, even when life is very difficult, still choose to learn, choose kindness, and choose to move forward bit by bit. And then, many years later, they make others think they were lucky, when in reality, they had simply been patiently building their future long before. Life is never static. With each passing day, you are either moving closer to the person you want to become or unconsciously drifting away from them. There is no state of standing still. Like a boat on the ocean, if you do not actively steer it, the current will automatically carry it in another direction. Look at the present with a deeper sense of awareness. The way you think today, the way you love, learn, work, and face difficulties right now is the blueprint of your future. Do not wait for a special day to change your life, because the truth is, the future is not created tomorrow. It is being created in the very moment you are living right now.